Thank you. And today's webinar is about native meadow restoration with Dan Cook at CLINTON+RIES Landscape Architect. Before I hand over the screen share to Dan, I would like to thank our funders and supporters and volunteers. Without fundings, a lot of our programs would not happen. So again, thank you. And Dan, I'm going to stop sharing so you can share and give us a little background about yourself and your presentation.
Thanks for having me. My name's Dan Cook. I am a landscape architect at CLINTON+RIES Landscape Architects. We're located just outside of Washington, D.C., but I live and work out of Sunnyside, Queens, so local to here. I just moved up like 6 weeks ago, so it's been really fun, really exciting. I'm from Long Island originally, so it's great to be back and getting to present here. This is my second presentation with Rewild Long Island. I did one in the spring about green roofs. But today we're going to talk about some native meadow restoration. We're going to talk specifically about one project that was installed at kind of the end of 2022. So it's coming into its third full year of life, and we're seeing a lot of really fun, exciting things as we stay on the project as part of kind of like a maintenance part to help the homeowners grow and kind of see the vision of this project through. And then there's a couple other projects that I kind of sprinkled in. One of them we just planted literally 6 weeks ago, and I'm going back down to DC next week to take a look at it. So I'm pretty excited about that. And then another one where we planted probably like 10 weeks ago. So we'll see some imagery, all meadows, all a couple different type of installation methods. So with that, we'll kind of get going. So the first slide is really just a baseline definition. What is a meadow? It's an open habitat or field vegetated by grasses, herbs, and other non-woody plants. So that's really high level, right? So we're talking perennials, forbs, grasses, herbs, sedges, and very limited pockets of trees and shrubs kind of on the outskirts. We're thinking plains, prairies, meadows, all those kind of fun synonyms that go hand in hand with these. And so what we're looking at here is it's an ecoregion level 4 map. And if you're a map person, I highly recommend looking into it. It's really fascinating. What they've done is they've taken the country and they've subdivided it into these 85 unique ecosystems, and then even have broken each of those unique ecosystems out to some hyper localized levels. And the reason I show this is because when you think of meadows, you really tend to think of kind of this central part of the country here, right? The Great Plains, just rolling fields endlessly as far as you can see. Maybe some alpine meadows in the Colorado Rockies with, beautiful lupin fields, or California poppies in the Sierra Nevadas. But what's really left out is kind of the East Coast where we live and what I say that because those ecosystems, there are robust open plains, prairies, and meadows that exist here. It's kind of a forgotten part of this larger ecosystem. And so, like I said, there's 1 through 85, and you can see here, 58, 59, 61, 63, 64, 65. There's a huge number of 65s. That's this sort of tan color that goes from southern Maryland and wraps all the way down almost to Louisiana. That's your southern coastal plain, which is tons of open meadows all throughout there historically. 65, 71, 75, you get the gist. So that this ecosystem is here, it exists. And even specifically here on Long Island, there's 3 of these super local ecoregions here. So mostly on the western side of Long Island, Brooklyn, Queens, Nassau County, uh, part of the northern coastal zone, specifically the Long Island Sound coastal lowland. And you can see the definition covers most of southern New England and coastal areas of New Hampshire and southern Maine. And its landform include rolling and irregular plains. So these big, vast, open areas of predominantly perennials and grasses that exist here. And then on the south side of the island and pushing out towards Suffolk County, there's the Atlantic coastal Perrine Pine Barren ecosystem, the 84A Cape Cod, Long Island, and 84C Barrier Islands and coastal marshes. Again, large swaths of just these plains ecosystems that we'll be talking about. And so I mentioned that because they're here. They existed, and restoring them is important to the ecology of this place that we call home and we live and love. And so why is this important? You know, why do we want to restore these once robust ecosystems that have kind of fallen out of favor or don't really exist anymore in this place? And so this is kind of a famous photo from a study done. It shows a native perennial root system, which the guy is holding up, versus like an annual agricultural root system, or even something like an ornamental plant. And you could just really, it's quite stark, the difference. The native plant, the guy's holding it above his head. The root system is kind of draped on the floor. It's probably a 9 feet long root, whereas the agricultural portion is very small. You know, we're lucky if it's hitting 1 foot of depth into the soil. And so what does this do? Why is this significant? What these roots are going to do as they grow and expand and create this matrix that you can see to the left here, is those are all going to grow together, and they're naturally going to start to decompact the soil. They're going to grow, they're going to fracture soil, they're going to start to break it down, create air pockets. And inside these air pockets, it's going to allow for water absorption. So it's going to rain, water's going to come down, it'll trickle down. It'll allow, one, the plants to be watered, two, aquifers to be refilled. It'll promote absorption rather than runoff. So rather than the water hitting a super compacted site and sheet flowing off of it, it's going to drift and kind of percolate down and help prevent erosion, help to kind of reduce the stormwater load that places like down at Cedar Creek, where they do wastewater management, they get super overloaded on big rain events, help prevent that. And then we'll let that guy put his arm down for a second. But what else they're going to do is they're going to provide these beneficial ecosystems for native insect and animal species. So there's ground nesting bees, there are stem nesting bees, you know, which, sidebar, don't cut your native grasses back until at least the end of March. You want those animals, those insects, they want to live in there and stay warm just like you do during the winter. You know, seed heads, the birds, they'll eat them. They'll use the spent foliage for nests, again, overwintering birds. Really quite important to have these native plants that these animals have evolved with for tens of thousands of years. You know, when you think of monarch butterflies and you know, milkweed, you know, it's a symbiotic relationship that has evolved over thousands and thousands of years, and it's important to provide that and have that for these critters. And then the last thing from your garden perspective, what does that do? So when you think of plants that have been here, they've evolved to be here. Once they establish, there's a drought, you see that root system. It's 10 feet down. It's accessing water that maybe ornamental plants aren't reaching down and establishing. It's reducing your need to irrigate. You know, they're growing together. It's reducing your need to mulch 2 times a year. They're creating what's called green mulch. And so they're really providing a lot of benefits to you as a gardener, as a homeowner, and someone who's interested in planting. And then, you know, there's million other things about ecosystem benefits and public health and being within nature and immersing yourself in nature and that being positive for your own health. And that's a whole other presentation that we won't dig into right now. We'll kind of get into the process of these meadow restorations. So here's a photo of that job site. The project is a home on the Magothy River, which is in Pasadena, Maryland. And it's a direct tributary to the Chesapeake Bay. So this is a photo from, they have a dock. This is a photo looking back up at the property. And so where we always like to start sort of as landscape architects is understanding what we're working with. And I mean, you can see here, this was 3 before images. It's kind of a blank canvas, which is really nice to work with. Big sloped lawn, nice little quaint house on the river. Couple existing trees in the perimeter of the side yard. So overall, you know, pretty clean slate to start with. And so again, as designers, we start drawing plans, kind of defining what we want to do with this space. So this was a master plan we created for the homeowner. All their driveway remains existing. Their front yard, that is their existing septic field. So largely left that untouched. And what we're going to really focus on is this rear yard, which is a sweeping sodded lawn that connects from the driveway to seating area in the back. This with the rear pointing up. We had developed a concept with them where we flipped what you vision as the front of the house when you approach by boat from the river. So that's part of a larger kind of design matrix we had, or design conversation we had with them. But that's that screened in porch that you can see in the last photo here. So sweeping lawn that connects, we have railroad tie steps that connect down to their dock. And that was a permitting thing. It being right on the tributary of the Chesapeake, very limited in what you actually can develop within 100 feet of the shoreline, and the materials you can use. So no footings. These are just kind of elegantly carved into the hillside with some rebar stakes to hold them in place. And that's it. That was about, we were kind of lucky to get that from the county. And then kind of to navigate that hillside, this native meadow that we talked about, with a little bit on the plan right side of that that staircase. Little seating area overlooking out over the river. And what we also did, we worked with the homeowner. We created these plant matrices. So just thinking about what types of plants are going to be in bloom during what season. So you can see top left is spring, and then, you know, as the weather heats up, so does the bloom activity. So there's a lot of stuff going on in summer. In the fall, we have a nice collection of plants out there that have really nice fall interest. And then again, kind of moving towards winter, you know, what kind of interest can we generate with this kind of ethos of the 4-season garden, and something that you can look to any time of year and be inspired by. And so this is a plant list that was developed. This is a portion of one. This is just kind of the rear yard. And you can see in the bottom, that is the seed mix for the meadow, which I'll talk about more in depth on the next slide. But also wanted to mention, which again, I'll touch more on in a few other slides. Some of these, Baptisia, the Liatris, the Panicum straight species, the Vernonia, those are all species we interplanted within the seed mix of the meadow. And then these are the realized plants of that seed mix. So there's Agastache, there's Asclepias, 2 types of aster, Baudaloa, Coreopsis, 2 types of Eragrostis, Amanarda. All of these are native. The Onothera, 2 types of Penstemon, Picanthamum, Rudbeckia, Schizocherum, Solidago, 2 types of Tritoscantia, and some zizia. And so what I want to kind of touch back on is if you come back and look at the seed mix here, these are all percentages of that seed. So you can see very little Agastache, a little bit of Asclepius, a little bit of Aster, and then bam, 50, almost 50% Daudaloa, little bit. And that's something we worked through with Ernst Seed themselves. They're a really helpful company, really great resource if you're interested in doing this. And when you think about kind of these meadow ecosystems that you see, when you look at it at a glance, it kind of looks like there's a million things going on at once, right? There's yellow flowers, white flowers, purple flowers. But when you kind of sit back and analyze it, and Thomas Rayner and Claudia West talk about this really nicely in their book, Planting in a Post-Wild World, which if you haven't read it, it's great. But they talk about the idea of there being like a matrix or a matrix plant that makes up the bulk of what you're looking at, and then all the other plants kind of pop up and create sort of the patina that when you look at it at a glance, you're like, whoa, there's so much going on. So that when we worked with Ernst, we talked to them about the site and what what we wanted for it, and they have a whole catalog of seeds. They also have ecoregion specific seeds, so they can say this is a seed that was harvested in coastal Maryland, and that's kind of really special to each individual project when you start to pull plants that were harvested in that area. So anyway, that's the matrix plant for this install, and then all the other ones start to kind of pop up and create the seasonal interest, from month to month there. So yeah, a couple of my favorites, specifically Schizocherum, that's little blue stem, beautiful grass, Picanthamum mountain mint, that's awesome. A lot of good ones. And so we're through design. Now we kind of get to the fun part. We're playing around in the dirt, installation. So this is a photo, obviously, when we had cleared out everything that was existing, that big sloping lawn. You can see the railroad tie steps are set in place. And step one from an installation standpoint is, manually remove the plants you don't want. So turf, gone, any kind of ornamentals you don't want, gone. For turf, what you can do is you can cover it with like a tarp or something and kill the grass that way. Or, I mean, in this case, we had a bulldozer because we were working with landscape contractors. So we just went out and kind of sliced the top layer of that sod right off. And then an optional methodology, and we didn't do that here, but it's very effective, and it's pretty low like impact outside of what it's expected to do, and that's a chemical soil amendment. And you can kind of go two ways with it. So on the one hand, if you have, say, an area that has been turfed and you don't have a sod cutter and you just want to kind of mow your lawn to as low as it can go, you have the little parcel land, you want to do it by yourself, you can go out there with your lawnmower, mow it as low as you can go, and you can apply sulfur. And what that does from a chemical standpoint is sulfur lowers the pH of the soil, which makes it more acidic. And when soil is acidic, the nutrients in the soil bind to the molecules of the soil. And that makes it harder for the plants to absorb those nutrients. It's measured through cation exchange capacity. If you are interested in nerding out about soil, you can look it up. It's pretty interesting. And so what that does is it reduces how many nutrients the plants are able to absorb. And it sounds counterintuitive, but turf grass thrives in really rich nutrient soil. That's why it constantly wants to be fertilized. It just wants to be fed and eat and grow and outcompete everything and blanket. And when you limit the resources that turf can get, it is able to be outcompete by these native plants. Those plants are more adept to living in poor soil conditions, and then they can begin to outgrow and outcompete the turf grass. On the opposite hand, if you have a site like this where it's just dirt and you want to give your perennials a little kickstart, you can till in like an inch of pine fines or an equivalent organic matter. Pine fines work great here. Obviously, we just talked about pine barren ecosystem. So that's kind of, if you have those two different conditions, two kind of ways you can manage that differently. And again, both of them optional, but just a little added punch if you need that. And then beyond that, you want to prepare your soil on like a mechanical level. So you want to go over the soil with a dethatching machine, or take like a grading rake and run it perpendicular to the slope. And what that does is it kind of just mucks up that top inch or top layer of soil and creates a lot of nooks and crannies and surface area for the seeds to kind of adhere to and fill within. And so step two, once you've prepared your site, you can kind of go out there and rip it, define your beds and start planting. So there's two predominant methodologies. There's seeding, and then there's planting containerized plants. There's benefits and drawbacks to each, and they're not mutually exclusive. You can do combinations of both. So on this job site on the Magathy, we did in fact do both. And part of that is because we knew there were certain plants we wanted to have immediate impact, and we knew we wanted to use them in specific areas to frame views or block views in some instances. So when you work with planting containers, you have that more immediate impact. You're taking a plant that's already out of the ground and you're saying, here, put it in the ground somewhere else, and then it can start growing kind of immediately. It has a root system, it's developed, it's ready to go. With seeding, it's a little bit slower. You seed everything out and you're kind of playing the waiting game. You're letting stuff come out slowly. You're watching it grow from functionally a centimeter to as big as it can get, sometimes 5 feet. But with seeding, you also get a level of density and diversity that you can't really match with planting containerized plants. If you think of taking a handful of seed and sprinkling it in, say, a 2 square foot square, you're gonna have hundreds of seeds in that little 2 foot square, whereas you can probably realistically plant 6 containerized plants. So you lose that real density that you would see in a natural meadow or plain. And then from a diversity standpoint, when you're seeding, you're functionally creating a new seed bank. So for instance, you'll see in kind of towards the end of this presentation that as each year has gone on, new things have come up in the meadow, and where once we were like, oh, this is a big swath of coreopsis, this is going to be beautiful, the next year it's something totally different. Whereas with planting containers, the plants have to, one, come to maturity and then start to create their own seed bank, so you lose sort of that initial evolution from season to season. And so the top 2 photos here are obviously of the job site on the Magathy. So this is right after we seeded. I want to say it was maybe 3 weeks after we seeded. And you can see some stuff starting to come up, and that's mostly cover crop, which we'll touch on in a second. But then you can also see some bigger stuff, mostly towards the top, in this picture on the right here. So those are our quart container plants that we planted within this matrix here. The bottom 2 images, that's the job that I had mentioned in the beginning. It's one in Gibson Island in Maryland that we literally just planted 6 weeks ago. And you can kind of see we did predominantly these little 2-inch plug plants throughout the whole gardens. There's some larger ones that we weren't able to get the plant we wanted in a plug, so we upsized it to like a quart or something. But we went around, laid out thousands of these little plugs, and it's currently filling in. So I'm excited to see how that one starts to look as it evolves through the summer. So seeding, I'm not going to touch too much on the methodology for planting containerized plants. You take it out of the container, you dig a nice little hole, you stick it in, you pat it down real nice and let it do its thing. With seeding is a little more finesse to it. So you want to start, you divide. If you have multiple mixes, you want to get your, kind of like when you're starting a recipe, you want a mise en place. You want to get all your food ready to go. You want to get all your seed mixes ready. So if you have a certain seed mix for the top of a slope, because those plants don't like wet feet, like wet roots, then you get that ready. And then you have your second seed mix for the bottom of the slope where all the water is going to collect. And those plants love to be wet and they're happy. So you get yourself all squared up, you mise en place. And you mix the seed with a bulking agent. And oftentimes that's kitty litter, weirdly enough. It sticks. But you can also use a moistened like wood shaving or any sort of organic matter. Hay is used. And then you go out and you disperse your seed either by hand with a slit seeder. Once it's all set out and dispersed, you lightly rake it, and you can hit it with a drum roller if you want, just to kind of get everything incorporated into that top thin skim layer of soil. And then the last thing you want to do specifically on a slope is install like a type of erosion control. So you can see here, we had this like canvas matting. You want to make sure though it is permeable. From a light perspective, it's not gonna like completely cover the seeds. There's a lot of seeds that require sunlight to kickstart the germination process. So you want to make sure that it's not gonna blanket what you just seeded and prevent those plants from coming up. You want to, make sure that there's some light that can get down and into the seeds. And then you can just affix that with sod staples so that it doesn't blow away. The timing of when you seed can also influence your methodology. So like I said, this one was seeded in the fall, so end of 2022. And so what we did was we included a cover crop, which is an annual cool season grass. We did winter rye. And the purpose of that is so when you seed, these plants will come up and they'll grow through the winter, right? They're cool season, they want to grow all winter long. So they're growing and they're providing cover to your seeds that you want to eventually come up and outcompete this rye. And you choose an annual so that it dies at the end of the year. It won't exist for more than one season. It helps prevent the seeds from wind and birds and stuff like that. And there's another methodology or type of a way you can seed, which is called hydroseeding, which is basically when you shoot a slurry of this nutrient bulking layer, like a nutrient enhanced bulking layer with the seeds onto a slope. And that's for usually hard to access slopes. We weren't allowed to hydroseed this site due to its proximity to the Chesapeake Bay watershed. But we did just hydroseed another job site in DC, which is these bottom two images. That's my buddy Abron. He's spraying all this seed onto this hillside. That was hydroseeded on June 21st. And you can see on the right here, that photo was taken ago, the 24th. So that's kind of how quick this nutrient enhanced slurry helps to kickstart the seed. It's also helpful that it's like prime growing season down in DC. It's hot, it's humid, and plants are just loving it. And then kind of the bread and butter of these meadow projects is the maintenance. It kind of is what takes the meadow down to the next level, and allows it to really establish itself and be as beautiful and diverse as it wants to be. So we have a pretty robust maintenance plan here. And so it varies by season. So in your first season, so this would be for this project, spring of 2023, we came out and you want to take that annual cover crop and you want to mow it to 1 to 2 inches by April 1st and just get everything on an even keeled, even playing field. And then every time the meadow reaches 8 to 10 inches, you want to come through and cut it back to 4 to 6 inches. And what that's doing is it's forcing all of these plants to put energy into their root development rather than shooting up and trying to, you know, get the sunlight and shade all the other plants out, because that's inevitably what they want to do. Is the plants want to outcompete themselves, each other. So what you're doing is you're keeping everything an even playing field. They're getting to 8 to 10 inches, you're cutting it back to 4 to 6, and all the plants this whole time, they're all developing these really robust, those big, beautiful root systems that we saw in those first couple images. Those are being really richly developed, instead of one type of plant coming up and just out shading everything out, and you know, there's your meadow, one type of plant. So during that, you obviously want to identify problematic weeds, thistle, you know, any honeysuckle, vines, all the usual nonsense plants. And you obviously want to get those out of here. And then this is our spec for this project. So we had reviews to come and ensure that that was happening properly, meet with the maintenance folks, and so on and so forth. So once you get through your first year, you're doing that, you know, throughout the year. Every time the plants hit 10 inches from April until dormancy, you're cutting them back, you're keeping them at that 4 to 6 inch level. Then you get to that second and third season, you get to April 1st. Again, you cut everything down 3 to 4 inches. And you do that between April and May. And you identify any problem areas during your first year. You can go then and reseed, overseed areas that are barren, or if you wanted to then introduce like a new species into it, you can then go in and add, say, coneflower or whatever. And then until July 1st, you're letting that meadow hit 12 to 15 inches, and then you're cutting it back to 6 to 8 inches. So again, now the roots have developed, and you're keeping everything on an even keel, even playing field for all the plants. And you're doing that until July 1st, you know, basically through the end of that year, keeping everything kind of low as best you can. As you move into then your fourth season, you come into the spring, you mow down to 3 to 4 inches, and you're kind of set it and forget it. You're ready to go. So then you know, you're just doing your regular weeding, any seeding you want to mix in. And then obviously for each season, similar to what any landscape contractor would do at your home, there's spring and there's fall. There's different regiments for the type of maintenance you want to do. So in spring, you come out, you cut everything back, pull your winter annual weeds, remove any excess leaves, rake, fertilize. That's for the sod lawn. We don't fertilize the meadow. You know, you can re-edge your beds. There's an irrigation system along the foundation of this property, so turn on the irrigation at the foundation. And then in the fall, that's again where you come in, you fertilize your sod lawn, aerate the sod. But you're just letting the meadow, do its thing once you hit that you know, end of third into your fourth season. So that's sort of where we're at now with this meadow. We kind of pushed this up a year because the homeowners were getting they were like, we don't want to look at a 8-inch high meadow. So we kind of expedited a little bit with them. And you can see, so we had a little snafu year one. Things got a little bigger than we wanted them to. It rained a couple weeks heavily, and the maintenance team didn't get out there, and things came up, and some winter rye went to seed, and you can see it's like Coreopsis field, you know, kind of what you're trying to avoid, a single species takeover of this meadow. There's a little bit of Monarda in there. You can kind of see it in the foreground on the picture on the left. And then all that grass, that's a bunch of winter rye that seeded itself in, which was not a great find when we went out there to assess this. But this is year one. So you can see, kind of a single species takeover of the site. We worked really hard with the maintenance team to thin out that winter rye. And this was year 2. So this was, I want to say spring of 24. This was last spring. So we were out there, and you can really start to get a sense of a little bit more diversity that's occurring in the meadow. You still see there's a lot of coreopsis that's coming up, but there's some white flowers coming up. You can see more grasses coming up, and it doesn't look as uniform, right? So once we kind of got back on track, kept our mowing in line, things were able to catch up, and not all was lost in that regard. And then this year, so this was taken, I want to say, end of June 25th or so. So you can really see we've kind of righted the ship now, right? So there's a little swath of winter rye that we're working through here, but we got some baptisias coming up. You can see there's a whole bunch of different textures. The mountain mint out there was so happy. The schizocarum was great. There's a ton of grass, and no yellow. There's no, a little bit of coreopsis in the back there, but like that takeover did not occur, and we're proud of that. And so these are just a few images that we took during that week, and you can really start to pick up on the textural differences of each of the individual plants. Like I said, that's that little swath of rye. But it looks like right along the edge, we have some liatris that wants to get ready to bloom. There's definitely some baptisia in there. Big old swath of little blue stem. The overall matrix of that Bataloa is still persistent. You can see it kind of in the foreground here. So overall, we were able to kind of salvage that diversity that we were trying to build after a little hiccup in the first year, a little maintenance miss, and get this kind of righted. So again, just looking down, seeing all the diversity, and you can really start to pick up all the textural differences. And like I said, this was end of June, so there's a lot of stuff that's about to be kind of in bloom. Again, when I'm down next week, I'm really looking forward to like stopping in and on the way to the other job. They're actually, this road is very close to that other meadow where we did all the plugs, so I'm going to try and hit both of them while I'm down there and check on the progress. It'll be pretty exciting. And then, yeah, I just wanted to shout out a couple resources. I already mentioned Thomas Rainier and Claudia West, their book. That's a great one. Larry Weiner, I'd be remiss not to mention his name. He's kind of like the Meadow guy, the Meadow master, if you will. He started New Directions in the American Landscape. It's a really phenomenal resource. They do awesome webinars. I've sat in on several of them. A lot of the stuff I learned and we implemented in this project, and I talked about today, I learned through those courses. And then Ernst Seed, again, I mentioned that's where we bought our seed mixes from. They have seed mixes. They're based out of PA, Pennsylvania, but they have hyper localized seed mixes kind of all throughout the East Coast and beyond. So I'm sure if you were interested and contacted them, they would have several Long Island blends, or if you have a waterfront property, they'd have an estuarian blend and beyond. And then this is my contact and our website. If you think of a question and want to just shoot me an email, you're more than welcome to. I'm like always happy to chat about plants. So thank you. And if there's any questions here, I'm happy to chat. So thanks.
Thank you so much. That was great. One question was about peat moss. Do you use peat moss in the mixes with the seeds in order to?
Oh, for like the binding agent, you probably
Yes.
could use peat moss. Yeah, I've never done that. I've used pine fines. Like I said, I know hay has been used. We actually use kitty litter on this one. But I've never used peat moss, but it's the same kind of thing. Any kind of like wet or damp sort of organic matter, anything that's going to break down, but also the the reason you have that binding agent is because you want the seeds to stick to it and then it stick to the soil. So nothing gets wind blown. You don't have a big windstorm and all this seed, you did all this prep, you dug all these, pushed all the soil around, and then a windstorm comes and blows all your seeds. It helps to just kind of anchor them for that initial kind of while they root in, basically.
And also another thing about peat moss is it's not a renewable energy. So if you do use it, just be cautious on on where it's coming from. Um,
Right.
um, the one comment from Nancy, the meadow is beautiful. I think the different textures add so much visual attraction. Do many gardeners overlook that factor?
Yeah, I think so, but I think it's kind of the difference between like if you work with like a landscape architect or a horticulturalist and you work with a landscape contractor, right? There's kind of levels of people who are really into plants, and like in our firm we take a lot of pride in our planting design, and we do a lot of like container planting, and container planting is like very heavily influenced by textures because you're taking something like this big site and kind of trying to mash it into like an 18-inch diameter pot. So we use our experiences in all these different sectors, commercial, residential, these container plants, but it really is something that is not talked about enough. In my opinion, the textures of everything, especially because when you think about plants in bloom, not all of them are like your rudbeckias or your echinaceas, or that are going to bloom for 4, 5, 6 months, or your geraniums in the spring, Ingerworsens or whatever. Like a lot of them bloom for like a month or 5 weeks or something, and so the rest of that time they have this amazing texture, or underleaf foliage color that has a twinkle of silver in it or something. So yeah, it's a huge part of it, and it's what we really like to look for, and when we do planting plans, kind of pick things that will complement each other in that regard, as well as color.
One question on the winter rye, was that the 68.2% grass-like species list on your own seed mix? Or was
It,
seeded separately?
no, I think it was because the Battle was like 47, and then there was, yeah, I think it was like a 62%. Here, I can go back and look. So, oh yeah, whoops. So the 68.2, that is grass-like species. So that's taking the 47% of the Battle, and we uh we added the winter rye separately. It wasn't like this was a native seed mix, and then Ernst helped us blend the winter rye separately. So it's not included in this mix because for the homeowner's point of view, we want them to see what the meadow is going to be, not what it's gonna like. That's like an interim condition kind of thing. So overall, there's 68.2% of this seed mix is grass-like species, and then 31% is wildflower.
A lot of thank yous, very beautiful work and very informative presentation. Another question is, do you use soilless soil? Your potting mix, I guess, soilless potting mix.
Oh, not no. Only in container gardens when we do those. A lot of times what we'll do is like for these meadow instances, I tried to not really do any amendments. And because we work with landscape contractors, like we're able to usually clear the site pretty well. So the big thing I'll do is mix in like pine fines, or an equivalent. Like sometimes shredded pine bark is another organic matter, and we'll till that into the soil so that it decomposes and kind of has like an initial kick, almost like a fertilizer kind of thing, like a natural fertilizer, but we don't mix in like potting soil ever into the ground. And then for any like non-native, if we're doing like some people want like foundation gardens, it won't be 100% native. We'll use stuff like Hackanachoa or, some non-fussy ornamentals. Sometimes we'll work with a soil scientist. We work with a guy out of Penn State. He's really nice. His name is Rick. And he'll give us amendment recommendations based on soil tests we get. And sometimes it's like, add a little bit of phosphorus or, like mix in some sand to change the textural component. And he'll like kind of help us direct us in that way. So we do that sometimes. We do a lot of tilling in amendments. But again, never like a potting mix unless we're literally filling a container to plant it.
Thank you. Do you use pop-up spray heads throughout the establishment of the meadow? Because we do notice you have the sprinkler system on. How long does it have to be on? And what is the usual establishment period?
Yeah, so for this project, all the irrigation was solely at the foundation planting. So that was all drip heads. There might have been some spray heads in some of the raised beds, but largely for the meadow, what we did was they had a regular old lawn sprinkler with a hose, and we would, they would bring it out, they'd run it, and I mean, luckily because we started this one in the fall, it wasn't really on a watering schedule until the next spring. So we didn't really have to worry about that initially. Like the one we just planted is like, we can't get enough water on it right now because it's 110 degrees in DC with heat index and it's just hot. So, we're trying to actively water everything so that the roots really establish. But typically, if you plant, we usually don't like to plant later than July 1 due to heat. So usually if we plant in, say, June, we'll water July, August, September, maybe into October. It's still kind of hot in DC. Up here, it's probably cool enough. But then you don't have to water after that, and you can kind of assess your first year and touch and spot water as needed. And then usually by the time you're at the second year, everything's established. If it's all native, it's typically good. I mean, water doesn't hurt plants, so if you want to add water, you're more than welcome to, but they'll survive. They're able to. So
A question about zoysia grass. Do you remove that differently? Is there an effective way to remove it?
With a sod cutter. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like that stiltgrass, not weed. It's like, it's one of the bad ones. You just got to get in there. And the trick with all the really aggressive invasives or really aggressive non-natives is to just be consistent with it. So if you remove it, if you're doing exclusively manual removal, a lot of people will tell you that like an herbicide is functionally the only way to do it. I really try my hardest not to use herbicide whenever possible. There's like a handful of times you kind of just have to, specifically with like knotweed. It's actually basically just knotweed, but if for like zoysia grass, if you want to do just manual removal, anytime you see it, you got to be diligent. You have to hit it if it takes 3 times a week or if it takes, 5 times a month. Every time you see it, you just got to exhaust it, pull out whatever little bits and keep exhausting it. And eventually you'll win. But usually, I mean, it's nice being able to work with landscape contractors who have these big, crazy machines. Like it takes these guys nothing to sod cut a whole yard. So it's a lot harder when, we're doing it at your own home and you want to do it yourself. I get that. So it's really, the trick is to just exhaust it. You just got to be diligent. It's kind of a brute force game at that point.
Okay, thank you. We are going to have this presentation on record and it's going to be posted up. So if you need a copy or rewatch this, it's going to be online in a few weeks, just FYI. Another question just popped up about lessons learned throughout the process.
Lessons learned. The big one is as somebody who is specifying this for a homeowner, the big lesson is for us on this one was to ensure that there's a maintenance team, a capable maintenance team lined up for this first growing season. Like I kind of said, we let the winter rye get a little away from us, and you can see what happened by not having that strict regimented mowing schedule. That first couple photos where it's literally just Coreopsis, a little bit of Monarda, and all winter rye. You don't think so, but it happens like that. All of a sudden, there's all these plants, and there are just 3 species, and you put 27 species out there, and you kind of go into a little bit of a panic mode. So it's really important to have a maintenance team lined up, or be aware of what the maintenance schedule is if you want to do it yourself. I'm a big do-it-yourself guy, so I totally get if you want to go out there and like huck it. Just set the schedule and stick to it, because once we actually had to change the maintenance team after this happened, and once we got somebody who was like knows meadows and what's important and establishing the meadow, we were really able to right the ship really quickly, but it gets away from you fast. So you being clear and communicative with homeowners or who you're working with on what the maintenance that's required is going to be, at least for the first 3 years. A lot of people, when they think about meadow restoration, they want to do it because it's quote unquote like low or no maintenance, and no garden is going to be low or no maintenance, no matter who tells you not. So just being very honest and clear and communicative about what type of maintenance, especially in this 1 to 3 year period, that was a big lesson learned.
Question about clover lawn. What is your opinion about clover lawn?
Clover lawns, I don't really have an issue with them. I have one client actually who loves clover, and we planted like some funky varieties of trifolium for them, and now they're like kind of hybridizing themselves, and it's been really cool. But I don't go out of my way to spec them. I would prefer to do like a native steppable lawn, or you can like even grasses like airgrassis, or like Deschampsia gold tau is, I believe, the cultivar. It's like it gets like 8 inches tall, like those, or like a no-mow sedge. Those are always really nice. You can get a lot of really nice native carex sedges. So I always err on the side of those, but some of my friends are doing the clover thing, and they're really cool. They're funky. I don't have anything against them. They're nice.
Thank you so much. A lot of thank yous on the chat. And thank you everyone for joining us. And thank you, Dan, again for presenting with us.
Yeah,
And
thanks for having me.
that's an amazing, beautiful meadow. All our right of way and public land should look like that.
I agree. Yeah. One day we'll get it.
One day we'll get there. Thank you again.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining.